I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take your seats. Marissa, do we have anybody sign up for citizen comment? Okay, great. That'll take us right away to item number 4, business items. And I'm going to step up to the podium. Okay, why do I feel like it's the first day of class, right? But the first day of class, we need to make introductions, right? So I think everybody up here knows me, Mayor Rob Erickson for the City of Garden Ridge. Let's go around the room here, and we've got members of council in the audience. We've got, to my right where I'm sitting, Nancy Kane, who's our city administrator. We've got Mr. Charlie Zeck, who is our professor for this class that we're going to go through in civic governance. We've got Courtney Billy as our new Assistant City Secretary and Director of Communications or Communications Specialist for the City of Garden Ridge, and then Marissa Spencer, who's our City Secretary. The first thing I want to say is welcome and thank you for saying yes. So some of you have tremendous experience up here at the dais as commission members for planning and zoning, for the Quarry Commission, as well as chairman of those commissions, and a former mayor, Nadine Knaus, is up here, who was the mayor a couple terms ago. So was actually the mayor for me when I was sitting right where Liz Templeman's sitting, when I was on council for Place 2 back in 2017. So welcome, and thank you for saying yes. All of you are here for a reason, because you bring vast experience, both with civic government and the military, the business place, the running of homeowners associations, being a citizen, a responsible citizen. Some of you have great experience with that. Some of you have a little bit of experience with that. But each one of you was looked at and asked to be on this commission for a specific reason. And it's what you're going to bring to this class and what you're going to bring to this discussion and ultimately this endeavor to take the City of Garden Ridge, your home, from where we are right now as a general law type A city to hopefully a home rule city, to take us to that next level of local governance. I know you've all done the assigned reading, all 144 pages of Charlie's dissertation, which was outstanding, by the way, as well as the other reading, and then the kind of draft charter that we sent out for the city of Fort Stockton that Charlie helped with just this year, right? Yeah, and very similar to what we envision the Charter Commission putting together for our home rule charter to ultimately be put on the ballot, hopefully for, if we meet it in time, for this next general election, the first Saturday in May, for all of us to vote on to see if that's what we want to do as the citizens of Garden Ridge. So to take us to that next level. And what is that next level? I'm going to quote from Charlie's paper just quickly from the very beginning. In his introduction, from Adams versus Rockwall County, 1926, from Texas. Our people are firmly committed to the doctrine of local self-government. Even as subjects of Spain and citizens of Mexico, they lost no opportunity to exhibit the faith, and throughout the history of Texas as a republic and as a state, they have taken great pains to give the principle definite application in usage, enactment, and constitution. And then he quotes the former executive director of the Texas Municipal League, Frank Sturles. He calls local self-government the cornerstone of democratic government. And that's what we're trying to do. Are we trying to make a drastic change to the way we do business in the city of Garden Ridge. No, not at all. We are a general law type A city right now. When you have looked at the different types, the 3 different types of governance for home rule, there was mayor, council, there's council, manager, and then commission. We represent right now, as general law type A, that council manager type of government, with a few nuances and a few differences. And we're going to have some great discussions as we go along over the next 2 months with a busy schedule to talk about those changes that we want to make and what works best for the city of Garden Ridge. Let's talk some history, since we're in class right now, about Garden Ridge. Marissa, can you bring up that slide, the first one? Nope. There you go. Okay. This is fine print, right? And you all have this right in front of you. I'm going to point with a green pointer some things that I want to point out. This is a relief map of Comal County that was drawn in 1964 but updated in 1972. What is the significance of 1972? Well, that is the year that we became, for all of you that were at the party last 4th of July, a city. We incorporated as a city on the 6th of July, 1972. Happy 50th birthday, Garden Ridge. And why did we do that? We were a small population back then, and most of us lived in the Garden Ridge Estates area. Paul Davis Park wasn't there yet. It was just vacant lots. It was empty land. Paul Davis was a retired Air Force colonel, just like some of us up here. Jim, he was no different than you. And what they saw from as they built their houses right in the middle of this little area right here of Garden Ridge, next to a little bit of ways from the quarry. The quarry was here. It was here in 1936. What they saw was encroachment, inevitable encroachment that was coming from the city of San Antonio right here in Bexar County, and not so much New Braunfels, which had a population of 18,740 back then, but Schertz, which you don't see right here. Town of Schertz was right here, and they weren't all the way up to where HEB was in their industrial park right up against 2252. They weren't quite there yet, but that's where they wanted to go. And Paul Davis knew this, and he got together with his neighbors, one of whom happened to be a lawyer, and they said, you know, we need to figure out what to do because Schertz is making a play to put us in their ETJ. ETJ is extraterritorial jurisdiction. What does that mean? It means it's not part, that territory is not necessarily part of the city, but does fall under some small amount of guidance from that city, and ultimately a home rule city can annex that ETJ. So what Schertz was going for back 50 years ago, they wanted to expand out here past 2252 into what we know as Garden Ridge today. And as a home rule city, they would have eventually annexed us, that area, Garden Ridge, into their city. Now, what was their plan? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But I do, as I drive to HEB and I go from Garden Ridge past 2252 right into the industrial complex known as Schertz right there, I can imagine what Garden Ridge would look like today if Schertz owned, if this was part of their city out here. So 50 years ago, 51 years ago, we had the foresight as a small neighborhood to say we need to do something about this. So Paul Davis got together with his neighbors, hired their local attorney for not much money and said, hey, we're going to file to incorporate as a city. And they filed with the Comal County tax office, courthouse, I think the tax office, at the close of business in April on, I forget what day it was, but the very next day, just a little over 12 hours later at the beginning of business, the city of Schertz filed with Comal County to annex or to bring this area of Garden Ridge into their ETJ. So we beat them by a little over 12 hours. And the court filed in favor of us. And that's how we eventually became a city and we incorporated as a city on the 6th of July, 1972. So they had the foresight to do that. and to protect this area and their way of life and name the city of Garden Ridge and name all the communities and the roads out there to protect Garden Ridge as we know it today. Do we need to continue to do that? Well, we're not under the gun as much. We're not down to the 12-hour wire on that, but there is that discussion that's out there about ETJs and what kind of influence San Antonio continues to have on us, what kind of influence Schertz can have on us, what kind of influence does New Braunfels, who has expanded all the way down here, what kind of influence do they have upon us? Next slide, please, Marissa. This is today, we are surrounded on all sides, with the exception of Selma, with home rule cities. Now, Selma, in a discussion with their mayor, has some different reasons that they haven't pursued a home rule charter that we won't get into right now. It works better for them to not, as far as how they see it. I disagree with that as far as the city of Garden Ridge goes. I think it takes us to the next level of local governance to protect Garden Ridge. So this map is something that we took to the city of San Antonio twice now to talk to them about the ability to expand our ETJ, and we've talked about this in open council meetings, expand our ETJ basically out here a little bit to help protect us from development. Why are we doing that? Hey, Rob, nothing's developed there in the last 50 years. Well, things are changing now because of the Vista Ridge pipeline. Vista Ridge pipeline comes down from around a little bit up north. What's the name of the city that it basically comes from? I forget. Yeah, up around Belton, comes down there on a pipeline, and the Vista Ridge pipeline runs right outside of Shanethal Road, crossing 3009. Vista Ridge is the reason that Davenport High School was allowed to be built there, to have water. Davenport High School gets their water from the Vista Ridge pipeline, it's a big 18-inch pipeline, and they also have their own water treatment plant. That's the reason it's there. So what that does, for so long, this could just be ranches and whatnot up here. But now that there's accessible water that's owned by SAWS and the city of San Antonio, now you can see developments going in there. And currently there's a development called Enchanted Bluff that's going in just outside the Garden Ridge city limits, right about here. And we found out about it the same way that the citizens that are just outside of the boundary, right up where you live, Liz, just from word of mouth, and no official notification to the city at all, because it's outside of our city limits and not within our ETJ. We've had discussions with Comal County about this to go, hey, that's a foul, but they really don't have to give us much notice, if any at all. So what I'm getting to is that that's not the last development that's going to be planned there in Enchanted Bluffs, which is going to be a very nice development. But there are plans in the works, people putting together to put developments that are not going to be as nice, and there'll be a little bit more density with housing on the land, which means crowded 3009 for us, crowded Bat Cave Road for us, and we have zero influence on that. What we have proposed to the city of San Antonio, and they are amicable about it, is expanding out this way. A type A, general law type A city can go a half mile outside of its city limits to request to put that in our ETJ. And there's a lot of different things that go into that, and ways that we can do that. But if we are home rule, we can take that half mile and double it to 1 mile. And what does that do? Hey, Rob, are you looking to expand the city of Garden Ridge and make it a mile out there more, and get all that property and bring it into the city of Garden Ridge and try to develop it and whatnot? No, that's not what I'm doing, not what we're doing. What we're trying to do is look at the ability to provide another buffer out there to help provide some influence at what we can in our ETJ, if that happens, to help decide for ourselves as citizens what type of developments are going to go there that are going to directly influence Garden Ridge and who we are and what we want to remain as a city. The ultimate goal of something like this is that when my kids, Maggie and Judge, come home in 20 years, so in 2042 for Christmas or Thanksgiving that we just got done celebrating, that when they drive through Schertz to get here and down 3009, that, yeah, that industrial park's still there, but then they get into Garden Ridge and it looks much the same as it does today with, you know, some differences in the commercial development that will eventually happen responsibly on FM 2252. But it looks the same. That's the goal. The goal is when Forrest comes home from the Air Force Academy on Christmas break 20 years from now, that he goes, hey, Mom, Dad, it looks the same as it did 20 years ago or so. And you go, well, no, it doesn't. It's, you know, we've got some of this and that, but that's what we're ultimately trying to do. That's not the reason for home rule charter, though. What we want to do for home rule charter is take us from a general law type A city and put it and solidify that and codify that in a constitution called a charter, to put it in the hands of the citizens, to say, hey, state legislature, while we appreciate what you do, we are now taking it out of your hands, because we're not changing too much, but we're codifying it and putting it into our own law to say, this is how we are going to conduct our self-governance at the local level. And because it's our Constitution, there's little to nothing that the state legislature can do about it on a whim. Not saying that they're going to, but they can't. We give the control of the city of Garden Ridge and our local governance officially to the citizens. And how we do that is ultimately up to this commission. So thank you for saying yes. It's a big job. It's going to be a great job. We're going to be busy over the next 2 months to meet that 72-day deadline to get it to the council, your charter, and have the council put it on the ballot so that it meets all the requirements to be in the next general election. And then we gotta market it. But leave that to me and the city, and you guys will help out with that too, because you're going to believe in it and go, this is what we want to do. We're not changing anything drastically. We're making modifications, codifying it, and putting it into law so the citizens can vote and take us to the next level to protect the city of Garden Ridge. That's why we're here. And that's why you said yes. Some of you more enthusiastically than others, and that's okay. I appreciate all your comments and questions in the last month and a half about, hey, Rob, what's this all about? Hey, I think it's going to be good. Just say yes. And you did that, so thank you. You've all sworn in. You've done the Texas Open Meetings Act training. Don't be afraid of the Texas Open Meetings Act. It's there to protect us, to protect you, to protect the city. If you ever have questions, you can text me or call me 24/7 anytime, and I will give you the best answer I can, if I can. My question's probably going to go straight to Nancy and or Marissa, going, hey, what's the answer to this question? Because they're the ones that keep us all safe and sound. So, and keep me from having to talk to Charlie and Cynthia, his other cohort, in a bad way, always in a good way. So there's questions there. Some training. In order to talk, you have to reach down and press the red button, and that's going to be on. In order to not talk or be picked up on mic, you got to press it again so the red mic is off. Watch this. Pretty easy. The more of you that have that microphone on, the less we can hear, the less that is recorded, because it picks up everything. So, Marissa, anything else on that?
Just one thing to add, Sean, the microphone in front of you does not currently work, so that's why there was one in between the both of you. So until we get that one working, we have two people that have to share, yes. Otherwise, if your microphone is not on, the audio will not be picked up on the stream. So just make sure to turn your microphone on before speaking. Thank you.
Okay, and you guys are not going to be happy with me about this, but it is the first day of class, and you remember what you have to do the first day of class. I tried to make as many introductions as I could as people walked in this evening, but I wasn't able to introduce everyone to everybody. So what we are going to do is go this way, so clockwise for me, starting with Sean. I just want you to introduce yourselves, tell us where you live, what you do, your family, and some of your experience that you're bringing to this. And I'm going to turn my mic off, but yours doesn't work, so you got to share with Diana. Sean, you're up.
All right. My name is Sean Willis. I've lived in Garden Ridge since 2010. Moved here with my wife and 2 daughters. I have a daughter that's a freshman in high school and another daughter that's in 7th grade. I've actually served on planning and zoning for the city of Garden Ridge for a term. I did have to step down due to family issues and things going on, but I did enjoy serving the city, and I look forward to being on the commission again, or on another commission. I currently own and operate an architecture firm, so I'm very familiar with development, home rule cities, those kind of charters that we deal with on the development side. So there we go. Thank you.
Thanks for saying yes. Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana Tillery, and currently I am the Wild Wind HOA president. I've been at that job for quite some time because I want to make it sure that we have the right people on the board, and they all promise me they're going to stay with me for a while. So I'm an Air Force, my husband's retired, but he was in the Air Force for 30 years and then a civil servant. And so he's retiring at the end of this month. But I've been here in Garden Ridge since 2012 and love Garden Ridge because it looks the same all the time, and I love it. So I like that concept.
Thanks for saying yes. From Auburn, Alabama, right?
Yeah, we moved from Auburn, Alabama.
Okay, War Eagle.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Templeman. My husband and I moved out here in 2002, and we live off Park Lane, which is off Back Cave Road, so one of the older sections. Kevin and I we liked it so much out here where we lived that we moved our veterinary practice from Live Oak out here, so we're at Garden Ridge Animal Hospital on 2252. And then we also raised 2 kids. We've got one who's in college, and we have a freshman at Davenport too. So this is my first experience in any form of government.
Thanks for saying yes. Gig 'em, right? Gig 'em. Okay. Jim.
I failed the first rule. My name is Jim Sturch. I live over in Wild Wind. I'm a 29-year Air Force veteran, did another 8 years civil service. My wife did 38 years of federal service and was a small business owner here in the local area for 23 years. We went fully retired a year ago, enjoying life, and this is my first time to ever do any kind of political work other than vote.
Thanks for saying yes. Wayne.
Wayne Mudge, moved into Trophy Oaks in 2003. Started serving on the Quarry Commission in 2006 and did it for 16 years. Dabbled in the HOA and spent 30 years in the Air Force, a few years as a slimy civilian and then a government employee. And now I'm retired, and my wife, school teacher, retired last year, so we're doing the retired thing, taking care of grandkids.
Outstanding. Thanks for saying yes. Nadine.
Hi, I'm Nadine Canals. We moved into Garden Ridge in 2000. We live in the Estates. Both of us, my husband and I, were both retired executives from CPS Energy, me back in 2003. And when that happened, I got involved at planning and zoning, so I was on the planning and zoning and was chair of planning and zoning for something like 15 years, 13 years, something like that. Anyway, got on city council and had the unfortunate issue of having to take over from Andrew Dalton when he became ill. And then I was reelected as mayor by the citizens. And like I say, my husband and I are both retired, so we're traveling, and I'm just really excited to be able to participate with this again. Thank you.
Thanks for saying yes, Nadine. Janelle?
Button, there's the button. My name's John L. Holly. I live in Trophy Oaks, and we moved there. We saw the property in 2000, and we said, well, we can do this, and we'll move here in 2005. And we've been here since then. And I'm a retired Army veteran. Wayne is my next door neighbor pretty much, so we've done some of the same things as far as the Quarry Commission goes. I've been on it for a few years just like him, but we're by that now. And I want to see the city do something good, so I wanted to do this.
Thanks for saying yes, Janelle. Autumn?
I'm Autumn Flanagan. We will have been here for 2 years next month, so pretty fresh. My husband is active duty Air Force, will be reserve starting in the new year. So big change for us. And we have fallen in love with Garden Ridge. We live in Garden Ridge Estates, close to the park. And we absolutely love it. Our daughter goes to Garden Ridge Elementary, and we have two, a 4-year-old and a almost 2-year-old. And we don't want it to change. We want to stay here and plant roots, and we want to keep it the way it is.
Thanks for saying yes. Armando?
Armando Diaz, been in Garden Ridge. Karen and I have been in Garden Ridge since 1999. Currently working with Saloff Limited in New Braunfels. It's an oil and gas business, and like what I'm doing. I've been there since 2006. Prior to that, I was with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas and retired from there after 27 years. Enjoyed working so much that I just keep doing it. But like Janelle and Holly, Janelle and Wayne, I also live in Trophy Oaks and been on the Homeowners Association and on the Quarry Commission, but not nearly as long as those two.
Thanks for saying yes. All right, we're going to have some fun. We bring a lot of experience to the table, and I appreciate you guys being here, being willing to do this, and we're going to get it done. It's going to be great. Charlie, I know you are not a man of few words. I know you've got a bunch of stuff to say. Are you okay if we go just to the next little portion here and talk about chairman and vice chair? Okay, while I'm on a roll here, is that cool? All right, so one of the things, we're going to move on to 4B, and that's ordinance number 210, and that deals with our commissions. One of the things in that ordinance is, some of you are very familiar with that ordinance, we need to elect a chair and vice chair. And what the chair and vice chair do of a commission is they, like I called the meeting to order, the chairperson's going to do that. Rise for the pledge. They're going to follow the agenda and kind of keep everything on track. And they're kind of like the proctor of the commission, of the class, if you will. They're going to make sure the discussions happen in an orderly fashion in accordance with the agenda and whatnot. And if there's ever any question, they'll defer to either Charlie, Nancy, or myself, or Marissa for clarification. The vice chair will replace the chair in the chair's absence. And what we'll do now is just open it up to what we nominate people for that. So I will open it up to nominations for the chairperson to begin with. Does anybody have a nomination for someone to be chair? Jim.
I'm Jim. I'd like to nominate Nadine Canasas, the chair of this commission.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Nadine to be the chair based on her vast experience of running meetings like this. So are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, if there's no more nominations for chair, we will call it to a vote. So all in favor of Nadine Knaus being the chairperson of the Home Rule Charter Commission, you can state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Nadine. That carries unanimously. You will be the chairperson for this commission for our next endeavor. The next thing we need to do is select a vice chair. So do I have any nominations from the dais for a vice chair?
I nominate Wayne Mudge.
We have a nomination for Wayne Mudge, who's giving the look to Armando right now. Thank you very much. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Sean Willis.
We have a nomination for Sean Willis, okay? Both tremendous experience. So any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, because we have two people nominated, I'll open it up to discussions. So is this something, I'll open it up to Wayne, is this something that you would entertain? Would you like to do this?
Under normal circumstances, yes, because I'd like to do it, but my current circumstances don't allow me to do that.
Okay, thank you for your honesty. Sean?
Yes, I'd be willing to do this.
Okay, so based on that, any other further discussion? Wayne, we'll pull you from that, and we'll just do it via the vote. So I'll call it to a vote if there's no further discussion. So all in favor of Sean Willis being the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Wayne, thank you for your honesty. Sean, you're the vice chair. Okay. I'm going to have Charlie come up here next, and then Nancy's going to be up here to talk about meeting dates and times. Thanks for listening to the reason that you're up here as far as I'm concerned. For Nancy and I, our functions as the mayor and the city administrator, we are advisors to you. I'm not the local expert on local government. That belongs to Nancy, Charlie, and Marissa and company, and many of you up here. So I'm not the expert, but I can point to the experts. I can give you my opinion on things, having been in the seat now for a little over 18 months. So that's going to be our function. And again, you can contact us 24/7. So thank you. Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Why don't we, if it's all right, Mayor, why don't we go ahead and just continue with the, talk about the meeting. Okay. Meeting dates and times, number of the timeline, and then
Welcome, everybody. Congratulations. Tonight, we're making history, the city of Garden Ridge. You've been provided with a meeting schedule. Our goal is to try to have this charter completed by the end of January, so we can take it to council at the beginning of February. Most of the meetings are going to be on weeknights, and those meetings will begin at 6 p.m. There are 2 Saturday meetings scheduled in January, and those meetings will begin at 10 a.m. All the meetings will be here in the room. We do ask, if you do find that you are unable to attend one of the scheduled meetings, if you either contact myself or Marissa in advance or as soon as you find out that you're not going to be able to attend, because we need to make sure that we have a quorum available to conduct any meetings of this commission. That way, we will know if we have enough people to meet that quorum requirement, which is part of the Open Meetings Act. Did anybody have any questions about the meeting schedules? I just had a question. What's the quorum for us? Y'all will have to, since there's 9 members, you will have to have at least 5 members present to conduct a meeting. It has to be a majority of the commission. Okay. Thank y'all.
it's my turn. It's your turn. How are y'all doing? Bet you didn't think Kenny Rogers was going to be talking to you tonight, did you? Always the little surprises, isn't it? It's always the little surprises. Let me talk a little bit about myself, not to waste your time, but I got to hear about y'all, and y'all probably don't. I know a few of you, Nadine, I thank you for reintroducing yourself. I do have some recollection. As I get older, my memory fades. I think I've met a couple of you on occasion, but it's always nice when you don't have a stranger talking to you. And so I'll just tell you a little bit of myself, just briefly. I moved to New Braunfels in 1972 when Garden Ridge incorporated as a city for the very first time. So I've been around for a while. I was just talking to somebody earlier, Nancy, and that fine lady in the back, that I used to ride Schoenthal Road quite often, because when you're 16 and sometimes you drink when you're not supposed to, that was the easiest way to get from San Antonio to New Braunfels. So it tells you a little bit about my childhood. But I've been here for a while. My life has been such that I flunked out of college for the very first time, joined the Navy. So for you Army and Air Force folks, I'm sure you guys are thinking, yeah, of course the guy that flunked out of college joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for 6 years, never saw a ship. I was shore duty in school for 2 years, and then shore duty in Rota, Spain for 4 years. So I never saw a ship. A Navy guy never saw a ship. When I talked to other Navy guys, they said, you were never in the Navy. So that's fine. That's fair. I get it. Got out of the Navy, went back to school, got a BBA in economics. I got a BBA in finance. I went to law school, and then I got a master's degree in public administration. So I went from flunking out to having more degrees than probably anybody needs, to be quite honest with you. I was the city attorney for the city of New Braunfels from 2001 until 2006, in-house as an employee. I left the city of New Braunfels to join Denton. At that time, it was Denton, Navarro, Rocha, and Bernal. I joined them in 2006. I became a shareholder in 2010, and I've been with them since 2006. I've been practicing law since 1998, and I've been practicing municipal law since 2001. So do the math, I've been practicing municipal law for about 21 years. When I got my master's degree in public administration, I did a applied research project, which is in your packet, which y'all have read, where I reviewed every single home rule charter in the state of Texas. That was a lot of fun. I did that, one, because I needed to do it in order to graduate, and two, I thought maybe I can get some business out of this if I do it. And sure enough, that's what resulted. I probably get hired on home rule charters for multiple reasons, either reviewing them, amending them, creating them, revising them, or giving advice regarding them 6-7 times a year. And so I do it an awful lot, and I know an awful lot about it. And I enjoy it. It's one of my most favorite things that I do as a local government lawyer. The reason for that is because this is where the rubber hits the road. It's where real government happens, in my opinion. The mayor was very kind when he said about the Texas legislature that he appreciates what they do. I don't appreciate what they do. I wish that they met every 290 years for 2 days instead of every 2 years for 290 days or whatever it is. I think that they do whatever they can to put their thumb on the good folks that run local governments. Sorry, Mayor, but, just my humble opinion, because this is where the rubber meets the road. So I've lived in New Braunfels since 1974. You know a little bit of my life. I have a wife. I have one kid. She's 32. She lives in L.A. She's an actress and things, so please don't blame me for any of that. I have no idea where she got that from. It was not from her father. Now, I saw that a couple of you, it's your first time, Mr. Sturch, Ms. Templeman, have ever doing anything with a local government or any government. Is that right? All right. So we have y'all, and then we have a former mayor. And is this your first? Yeah, this is your first as well. So what I think I'd like to do is kind of give a very high overview of local government and what that means. and your current form of government and what that means, and a home rule form of government and what that means. The mayor actually did a really, really good job explaining sort of the broad reasons why someone would want to go from a general law city to a home rule city. But let me give a really high overview, because I think it's important for you to know and understand kind of where we've been with local government in order to be able to figure out where you want to go and how you want to do this. How many, okay, you didn't know you're going to get a test either. How many different types of government, local government, are there in Texas? Not you, Mayor. You didn't say anything. Two? That's a pretty good answer. Two? Anybody else have any idea whatsoever? No? You have no. 5? That's actually not a bad number either. So, as a general matter, there are 2 different types of government in Texas. However, having said that, there's a general law government and there are home rule forms of government. However, in a general law, in the general laws, there are 3 different types of governments that can be created. So you're actually both right. As a general matter, there's 2, but when you get into the specifics under the general laws of Texas, there's 3. Why do they call it a general law form of government? Because you have to look to the general laws of the state of Texas to determine how your government is run, which is why the mayor said, hey, thanks, legislature, but we want to get away from you. The reason for that is when you attain a population of 5,000, you can create what is called a home rule charter, and this local citizens get to determine what their form of government looks like. You get to make that choice. You put it in the form of a charter, you put it before the citizens vote on it, and if it's adopted, then that's your form of government. The major difference between a general law form of government and a home rule form of government is that if you are a general law city, you must look to the general laws of the state of Texas to see if you have authority to do what you want to do. If the Texas legislature hasn't granted you that authority, you can't do it. A home rule city, on the other hand, has what is called the full power of local self-government, which, if you isolate it down to its main part, you have the same power as the Texas legislature in running your government, except where you have otherwise been preempted or prohibited from acting by either the Texas legislature, the federal government, the Texas Constitution, the United States Constitution, etc. So you no longer look to those folks in Austin to get permission for how you want to operate your community. Instead, your local citizens get to make that decision, and we only have to look to make sure that we haven't been, the word we use as lawyers is preempted in some way in operating. So you are currently operating as so there are 3 types of general law governments in the state of Texas: Type A, Type B, and Type C. Type C is a commission form of government. There's probably only a few of those left in the state of Texas. Most folks who are general law in the state of Texas operate either as a Type A or a Type B general law city. As a Type A general law city, you have 5 council members and a mayor. You have 2-year terms. That's basically it. The statutes lay out the authority of the mayor, which is limited, quite honestly, and then the governing body can then determine to give the mayor more authority or less authority in certain areas. In very, very small cities, I have a few cities that I represent that are under like 900 in population, and the mayor gets to run the day-to-day business of the city as well as run a full-time job and do those types of things. But here in the city of Garden Ridge, we have created a position called the city administrator who is a professional who runs the day-to-day operations of the city. And that's authorized as a Type A general law city. The process of adopting a home rule charter gives you the ability to determine what you want your government to look like. How many council members should you have? What form of government should it be? General law Type A is a council mayor form of government. You can create a council city manager form of government, a council mayor form of government, a commission form of government. You can have 5 council members, 7 council members, 9 council members. In a general law type A city, the mayor does not vote. Why doesn't the mayor vote? I don't know. My humble opinion is that the mayor doesn't have the vote in a general law type A city is because when it was created back in the day and they created a council mayor form of government, they knew that the mayor, because of the size of most of these communities, was going to be running the day-to-day operations. And so they didn't want the mayor voting on legislative policy when the mayor was also going to be running the day-to-day operations administratively, sort of the executive branch of the form of government. So the mayor doesn't vote in a type A general law city. If you choose, you can give the mayor the right to vote in your home rule charter. General law type cities, the citizens of a general law type A city don't have the authority to initiate legislation through petition, nor do they have the authority to remove any members of its council. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know the answer to that question. That's why y'all are sitting here. I get to tell you what it means. Y'all get to decide if it goes in the charter. But it can go in your charter. You can authorize the citizens to petition its government for initiatives, to petition its government for referendums, and to petition its government to have an election to recall one of its elected officials if it so chooses. None of that authority is given to a type A general law city. So there's a few major things that we need to be thinking about as we're going through this process. My recommendation to you in creating a home rule city, don't mess with what you have. Let's stay as true to what we have as we can, making the big decisions on the adding of recall if necessary, the adding of initiatives, the adding of referendums. Do we want to have 2-year terms? Do we want to have 3-year terms? Do we want to have 4-year terms? Those types of questions. But don't make major changes to what you have. And because you don't want to have if you want your home rule charter to pass, you don't want to shock the system. You want to have a smooth transition. And then after you've adopted your home rule charter, if it's decided 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years that some changes need to be made, you can put a body back together. They can discuss whether or not they think those changes are appropriate to be placed on the ballot, and they can be placed back on the ballot for determination at a future date. There's a example charter in your packet from the city of Fort Stockton. I chose that because the city of Fort Stockton is larger than y'all. They're about 9,000 in population. And they attempted to become a home rule city about 4 years ago, right around the time, they were about 6,000 or 7,000 population they did that. And somebody convinced them that they didn't have the authority to do it because they did the process wrong. They were told wrong. They could have done it if they chose, and they just chose not to. But they took a charter that was completed at that time, made some changes to it, and I assisted them with that process this year. And that charter is what they came up with. It's 16 pages long. They put it on the ballot for the November election, and it was adopted this last election cycle. They are now a home rule city under that charter. I chose that charter because they did what I think is a smart move. They did not really change much about about how their city currently operated. The major change they made is they gave 2 major changes. They gave the mayor the right to vote, and they changed their terms from 2-year terms to 3-year terms. But otherwise, they operated just as the city of Garden Ridge does when they were a general law type A city. They're a general law type A city. They had hired a city administrator and adopted an ordinance that gave the city administrator the day-to-day authority. So they created a home rule charter that was a city manager form of government, which is the equivalent of having a city administrator. It's just a name difference. That's all it is. Responsibilities are still the same. And it's short, and it's succinct, and it's to the point, and it doesn't have a bunch of extraneous issues in it that don't need to be in a charter. If you Google Texas legislature, the first thing that's going to pop up is the Texas legislature. On the front page of that, there's going to be a link to all the statutes, and you can pull that up and you can see all the statutes. There's like 20 of them or something like that. if you Google Muni Code, something that's come up that's called Muni Code. And Muni Code is the biggest repository for cities' ordinances, all right, and city charters. And so if you click on the state of Texas, a lot of Texas cities will pop up, and you can click on there, and you can see all the cities that have adopted home rule charters, and you can look at their charters. You'll look at some of those charters, and they're going to be very, very long. They're going to be 20, 25 pages long. The reason for that is because if you look at when it was last amended, it was probably in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. And back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, people still weren't certain what home rule charter meant under the laws. Now we know 100% what it means. It means that you have all the power of local self-government, and there's no need to do what old charters did, which is the city has the power to fix its streets. The city has the power to have a utility. The city has the power to tax its citizens. The city has the power to do this. The city has the power to do that. None of that is necessary in your charter now. So the Fort Stockton Charter, in my mind, is a very good model charter for a city that is going from a small general law type A to the very first time to be a home rule city and to get out from under the thumb of the Texas legislature. Probably said too much. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that I just said. And other than that, we can start with the process and have a discussion about how we want to go through it and determine what that process looks like and get down to the heavy lifting. Y'all were very quiet.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know a little bit about the city of Garden Ridge, so where can I look to see, when you're saying keep it simple and succinct, like go with what we have, where can I look that up to see? I only know part of it. I know, your council, city council and mayor, but all the little things that we're going to put in our charter, what can we look at to see and kind of put them next to each other, what we want to change or add to?
Right. That's a good question. It's a big question, if I'm being honest. So when you adopt a home rule city, a home rule charter, there's what I call some boilerplate language that should be in your charter. The first one is that the city has all the power of local self-government.
Right.
Right? And you only need to put things in your charter where you want to limit your local government with respect to its authority. I can't think of an area where you would want to limit your local self-government as to its authority. There was a time when folks wanted to limit the ability of city councils to annex, things of that nature. There's no need to do that anymore because the Texas legislature has done that for us. The Texas legislature has limited cities' ability to annex, which, without getting on a soapbox, was a horrible idea in my opinion. I think it's gonna result in some bad outcomes in the long game. But that's no longer necessary to put in your charter. The power of taxation is already limited by the Texas Constitution with respect to how you can tax and what you can't tax. In my opinion, the main things that you want to look at with respect to the adoption of this home rule charter that is not otherwise authorized is initiative, referendum, recall, terms, giving the mayor the right to vote. Those, and whether or not you want to add members to the council. Those are the 6 big ones, in my opinion. Everything else, unless there's some local issue that I'm unaware of, which is always very possible, but those are the 6 big things. Everybody know what an initiative is? No, yes, yes, probably yes, maybe yes, 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 not sure. Do you know what an initiative is, referendum is? No, all right. So if an initiative is the power of the citizens to petition its government to create legislation. What does that mean? I'll just give you the example that was a really big deal in the city of New Braunfels when I was city attorney. And it was quite a few years ago when smoking, for whatever reason, well, not whatever reason, I take that back. Smoking indoors became a very large issue. And the city of New Braunfels was petitioned, the citizens, and some individuals took petitions. They got citizens to sign that petition, and the petition was to request the city council to adopt an ordinance that prohibited smoking in all indoor areas. Restaurants, stores, wherever indoors is. The way an initiative works is that once that petition is presented to the city council, there's a variety of ways that it works, but the general way that it works is that if it's presented to city council and city council chooses not to adopt the legislation, then it goes to the ballot for the citizens to vote on. And the citizens get to vote as to whether or not that ordinance should be adopted or not. That's the initiative process. The citizens, think of it, the citizens are initiating legislation. They are initiating an ordinance that they want the city council to consider. If city council chooses not to adopt it, then it goes on the ballot for the citizens to vote on to determine whether or not it's adopted. In its worst form, it's the state of California. In its best form, it's done in a way where only important issues are brought forward. I'm actually dealing with several initiative petitions right now, one for the city of San Antonio and two for the city of El Paso, assisting them with those initiative petitions that they're receiving. A referendum petition, on the other hand, is where the city council adopts an ordinance, they adopt legislation, and the citizens believe that that ordinance, that legislation should not have been adopted. They don't want it to be in effect. And so a petition is gathered, people get signatures, they submit it to the city council, and as a general matter, the way that works is that if the city council doesn't repeal the legislation that they adopted, then it goes to the ballot and the citizens get to choose whether or not that legislation is repealed or not. There's a lot of nuances to those, okay? So that's just a very high level view. There's a lot of nuances to how those work, but that's a high level view. And then recall is where it should be obvious. That's where the citizens believe that a council member, for whatever reason it happens to be, should be recalled from their position as an elected official. They gather the appropriate number of signatures, and they submit it to the city council. If that particular council member does not resign, then it's put on the ballot to determine whether or not that person should be recalled or not. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. There's a lot of, especially when it's a 2-year term. Some of the, if I'm being honest, some of the, which I always am, unfortunately, because it gets me in trouble, some of the biggest political issues are recall petitions. I was city attorney for a city where it was a city council of 7 council members and a mayor, and 6 of the council members were recalled. They had no sitting government because 6 of the council members were recalled. So it's, you know, so those are pros and cons, and there's always a really solid debate as to whether or not recall should be part of your charter, especially with 2-year terms. So that's what initiative, referendum, and recall are. Those are always going to be big topics of discussion in your charter. And then giving the mayor the right to vote, your terms, 2 years, 3 years, keep it the same. Your 2 years currently, keep it the same. Council members, is 5 good? If you give the mayor the right to vote and you keep it at 5, that changes how things get adopted. We don't need to get into that now, but when that comes up. And so my recommendation actually would be to take, and maybe now is not the time to start to get into the heavy lifting, but my recommendation would be is if you haven't done it yet, take that Fort Stockton Charter home and read it and see what it says. I'm a little biased, but I think it's a well-written document, and I think it is a perfect transition from a general law to a home rule city with just a few minor tweaks to how the government currently works, and you don't want to shock the system. That was a very long answer to.
Does the mayor have a vote? Our mayor?
The mayor only votes in the case of a tie right now. And you could keep it like that, absolutely. You could vote in the case of it, just. Yeah, and I don't know what our mayor's, position on this is, but I can tell you that if you interview 10 mayors who don't have the right to vote, except in the case of a tie, 5 of them will say, I want that right to vote, and 5 of them will say, no way, man, I don't want to vote. I don't want that responsibility, not responsibility, but I feel I have more effect when I'm not voting. So, and there's pros and cons and positions on whether the mayor should or shouldn't vote, but that is something that you should consider as you're going through this process. And again, that would be a change to your current form of government. The mayor currently only votes in the case of a tie. Yes, sir.
So on your referendum, there's a petition that you say needs to be done, and I was reading in one of the articles that you had that it was a 20% of the population that needed to be on that petition. In a home rule city, that would be what, just 1,000 people? Is that what we're after?
So I'm not unsure of the context, but I can tell you this, that the number of signatures necessary to be on the petition is purely a function of your decision-making. I can tell you, though, in my opinion, that that number should be high enough to mean something, but not so low that you could go down on the street corner on a Sunday afternoon, gather the signatures, and bring it in. Because initiatives are expensive. Initiatives are usually, they should be for something meaningful, and the petition should mean something. It should mean that there's a significant percentage of folks that really believe that this should be on the ballot. But the number is a function of your decision making. Yeah, it'd be whatever. And there is a way it should be calculated, in my opinion, and we can discuss that once we get to initiative. You decide initiative is something you want in your charter. There's a couple of ways of doing that math, and I have a preferred way of doing it, and I can explain why it's my preferred way, and you can agree or disagree with me. I'm okay with either of those. I have plenty of people who disagree with me. It's all right. Yes, ma'am.
What's the current population of Garden Ridge?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm gonna defer to, because I don't know the exact number. All right, so
Can we all hear me? Yep, sorry, wow. So based on our meeting that we had with you, me, and Nancy, our census from 2020 came out, depending on what number you look at 4266, which is under 5,000 and hard to round up. So what we can do is, this was in Charlie's paper as well as our discussion that we had a couple of months ago before we embarked on this endeavor with the council. We can take our utility company, our water company, and the number of accounts that we have, and then multiply that by 3. Charlie, do I have that right?
You can multiply it. You should multiply it by the census number that determines, the average number of members per your household. And that's how most cities do it. They do that math, and then they take into consideration those folks who are not on the utility system, who have septic, and we come up with a number. So it is really impossible to come up with an exact number of your population. The important thing is, from our perspective, is that we believe, based on our math, that by the time we hold this election, we will have reached the 5,000 population threshold. And it's not a census number. The statute doesn't require a census number. It is what we determine based on a good faith analysis what our population is. And we had that discussion, and we firmly believe we're going to be there when we hold our election in May, and which is all that matters. And so we're probably going to be just over the 5,000 number when we hold our election.
The actual numbers that we came up with when we multiplied our number of accounts without talking about, hey, who's not on city water out there, but is on septic, and then as we develop 2252 with wastewater and whatnot, and developments go on there, we came up with 4,960. And so we think that without even having to round up, by the time we do this in May with developments, whatnot, we should be above the 5,000 marker. That's the math that we did. Did I answer your question, Autumn? Great.
Not very well. We were horrible at answering that question, but it's a difficult question to answer with specificity. Yes, sir.
So I'm Jim, and I'm a believer, it's not broken, don't fix it. And I'm trying to understand, maybe this question's for the mayor and Nancy. Could you give me some specific examples of things that the city of Garden Ridge has wanted to do, but they haven't been able to because they've been under the legislation of the Texas legislature?
I can give you one, and they'll probably can give you others. And this was the case with all of my general law cities back in the day, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So again, you have to look to the Texas legislature to get your authority to do anything. So for example, does everybody remember when payday lending and title lending was a big deal about 5 or 6 years ago? And these payday and title lenders were charging 25, 28% rates for folks taking in their car titles and taking out short-term loans. Well, the city of San Antonio adopted legislation that regulated how those title lenders and payday lenders could operate so that their citizens wouldn't be raked over the coals with those types of interest rates if they were in the unfortunate position of having to utilize those lenders to get loans. All of my general law cities came to me and they said, we want to do that as well because we've got these payday lenders coming into town and they're charging the exorbitant rates. And I had to tell them, you can't. You have no authority to regulate the rate structure for payday lenders because there's nothing in any legislative adoption that gives you that power or authority. You can regulate them through land use. You can regulate where they go through zoning, but you can't cap their how much they charge in interest. That's one example. There's no authority in the Texas legislature for a general law city to regulate that.
But that's a great example. With the 4,266 people, how many payday lenders do we have in Garden Ridge?
Well, that's just an example of a situation where general law city doesn't have the power or authority to regulate in a particular area of the law. For the city of Garden Ridge, maybe luckily that's just not an issue for you, and that's a very good thing. But that's just one example off the top of my head. I don't know if there's other things or not. I guess the best way to answer the question, unless we need to get into specifics, is that you never know whether or not you're going to need that authority until you want it and you don't have it. I mean, for me, that's the biggest thing, is I don't know what's going to come down the pipe for the city of Garden Ridge in the future that they see as an issue for their local constituents, and they come to me and they say, this is a big problem for us, Charlie. We'd like to do something to solve this problem. And I have to tell them, you don't have the authority to do it. If you're a home rule city, I don't have to tell them that. I can just say, yeah, you have the authority to do it unless it's been otherwise preempted. So it's hard to
I guess I'm just
forecast.
awful. We've been here 50 years. What are some examples of things that we wanted to do that we couldn't do as a city because we were under this
Regulating the quarry. There were many different ways we could regulate the quarry if we were a home rule city. Because we were not a home rule city, we have, what have we have, I'm trying to think of a way to say this in public. We have come up with, and luckily the quarry has been willing to work with us a little bit, but if we had a quarry that was not willing to work with us a little bit, many of the things that we have done with respect to the quarry could not have been done. Could not have been done. That's the obvious one for me for the city of Garden Ridge. We would have many, many more tools in the toolbox if we were a home rule city.
What Mayor Erickson was referring to earlier with extending the ETJs, would you be able to do that as a general law city?
You could. It's not dependent upon it's not dependent upon you becoming home rule. It's population based. So as soon as we go over 5,000, our ETJ is going to expand. However, only home rule cities have the authority to regulate nuisances within 5,000 feet. Is the quarry within 5,000 feet of its city limits? So if you're a general law city, even if you go over 5,000 population, even if it's a mile, you don't have the authority to regulate nuisances in ETJ. So nuisances that are within 5,000 feet of your city limits, you don't have the authority to regulate unless you're a home rule city.
So the other part then is the plans for the quarries down at the end of 3009 and the traffic that's going to create will becoming a home rule city allow us to mitigate anything?
I don't know enough about the specifics or the facts of that to even begin to answer that question.
Are you talking about the one at 46 and 3009? That would be, if we were home rule, that would be beyond the 1 mile. So it would still be out of our jurisdiction.
But what about the traffic that it's going to create within our city boundary on 3009 or 2252?
Don't think there's going to be much we can do.
It's a state, hey, is that a state
Yeah,
highway?
that's a state highway.
It's a
There's
state
not going to be anything that, even as a home rule city, that Garden Ridge would be able to do concerning traffic.
Yeah.
Controlling state highway.
The major thing to think about, and remember this, I haven't said it yet because we haven't gotten into the heavy lifting. I want to remind everybody, the decision, really what you're talking about in this commission is not whether or not we should be home rule. Because that decision has already been made by the city council and they have directed you to create a home rule charter. The decision as to whether or not we should be home rule is a decision that the citizens of Garden Ridge get to choose. Because whatever you put before them will be voted on by the citizens of Garden Ridge. And if the citizens of Garden Ridge say, we're comfortable as a general law type-based city with the authority that we have, and we choose not to adopt the charter, that is the citizens' choice. I always remind my charter commissions when we're doing reviews and when we're creating our first charter. The question for you is, is this something that should be placed on the ballot for consideration by our community for their decision? And the major difference, again, between the home rule, the major differences, in my opinion, between home rule and general law. A, the Texas legislature no longer gets to directly legislate how you operate. They have to negatively legislate how you operate. They have to tell you you can't do something, as opposed to giving you the authority to doing something. 2, initiative. No general law citizen has the right to initiate legislation through its government. No general law citizen has the right to request a referendum of its legislative body. And no general law city has the right to recall any of its council members for any reason. The only way to remove a general law city council member, regardless, is if basically it goes through district court, someone files a lawsuit, or they're convicted of of a crime that would make it, them ineligible to serve.
So this ETJ is a 1 mile limit for how long?
Forever, unless the Texas legislature takes it away from us.
So
Into
then
perpetuity.
once you expand out a mile, you can't wait 2 years and expand out a
No, sir.
mile?
It's population-based. So if you're, I don't have the numbers memorized, but
Okay.
under 5,000, it's a half mile. 5,000 to another population, it's a mile. And then from that on, it's a mile and a half until, like, the city of San Antonio has a 2-mile extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Okay.
And the main benefit of an extraterritorial jurisdiction is it prohibits other communities from encroaching closer to your community. But again, that has nothing to do with going home rule. That's all population-based. Doesn't matter if you're home rule or not.
Okay, now, so that takes me back to the original question about those, like you said, the 6 major things. So I didn't know, do we not have, the city of Garden Ridge does not have an initiative program? where-
No.
Okay, and so we don't have a referendum?
No.
Oh, okay. So as we go through this, when we write our charter, we're going to know all this and know how to word it. and
Yeah, that's
using
why
your-
I highly recommend you read the Fort
Yeah,
Stockton
read the
Charter.
Stockton.
Right, because
Okay.
that really lays out a good,
Okay.
it is a good roadmap for what you need to be thinking about.
And
Oh,
so we don't have a recall either.
You don't have a
But we
recall.
have terms,
You do, you have 2-year terms.
and then, of course, deciding on the mayor.
Yeah, and when we get into the heavy lifting on some of these issues, some of these what I consider to be the major issues, you're gonna have discussion and debate about, are 2-year terms good enough? Or is it perfect for our community, or should we have 3-year terms? There's pros and cons to all of it. If you talk to your elected officials, and I don't know about you, Mayor, but many elected officials say, man, by the time I get elected to office and I figure out how this local government thing works, I've got to start running for re-election again. And so that's why actually Fort Stockton decided to go to 3-year terms. They felt like 3 years was a better time period for an elected official to really get their feet wet and to do some changes. There's other issues as well. Term limits is always something that comes up for a debate. And so, I don't think a city of 6,000, it's a good idea to have term limits. You have a limited pool of volunteers as it is. And quite honestly, elections can self-perpetuate term limits, in my opinion. But those are all debates for y'all to have and discussions for y'all to have as you go through the process. And I will raise all those issues as we go through the sections.
Charlie,
For your discussion.
I think it might be helpful as we move through and you pick different topics, that you talk about what we have now versus what this gives us in a very concrete way. I think that's kind of what everybody's was asking. Back to your deal, is there one place where it's written down? No, it's the law, general law. I mean, and I think your point about why do we need this, I think Nancy can probably rack her brain. A couple of us can think of why and talk about that off-site with you, because that isn't what the Charter Commission's really been asked to do. We've been asked to, if we're going to go home rule, what does the charter look like? But I think as we go forward and try to sell it to the citizenry, we will have to understand why we think this is a good thing for the city. So I think that's something, but just a suggestion about how we
I
might
agree with
proceed
you.
with this.
Yes, ma'am. And what I will be proposing that we do is we just take the example, and I can give you other examples. I'm happy to provide other examples. Again, you can Google MuniCode, go onto the MuniCode website. It's free. There's no charge. Click on Texas and just pick some cities of similar, size. Don't choose El Paso or Houston, right? Just to get a feel for what their charters look like. Now, I will say that there are some old charters out there that I would say that's not a good example, because they're long, they're complicated, they're written in legalese, which is never a good idea. And they oftentimes have just unnecessary language. But there may be things in there that you go, oh, that's really something I would like to think about for purposes of placing in our charter. Again, I'm biased, But if you're looking at, to your point, Mr. Sturch, not changing things, fixing something that isn't broke, keeping your charter consistent with how your current government operates is the best way to do that. And that means, not, and I'm not telling you to do this or not do this, right? But that would mean, keeping your terms the same, don't add term limits, keeping your, keeping the form of government consistent with its current use, which is a city administrator. So council manager form of government, because that's how you currently operate. Just being consistent.
Hey, Charlie, can I jump in here really quick? Thank you. Jim, I want to answer your question fully.
You want to come up here, Mayor?
Yeah, I'll just give it there, thanks. So that's a really good question, Jim, and I want to come back and answer that to come full circle. And it's the same question that you asked me when we were talking about serving on this commission. Hey, Rob, do you have buy-in on this? Is this something you believe in? And it is. So off the top of my head, in 18 months in the seat as mayor, is there something that we've been prevented from doing as a city because we're general law type A and not home rule? No, not off the top of my head. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We're not broken at all. We have a very effective, efficient way of local government in the city of Garden Ridge. It runs extremely well with a very lean and balanced budget with 32 members of the city staff, 32 employees, 5 council members, and a mayor. So it runs very effectively and efficiently, and I think we all see that day to day. So it's what we don't see. It's what we talked about earlier about, our kids coming home, my kids coming home in 20 years with their families for Christmas and Thanksgiving and recognizing Garden Ridge and driving in and going, yep, this is where I grew up. I remember this. And we've kept it that country feel that when we came up with our master land use plan back in 2018 when we voted on it. Some of you were part of that process. Overwhelmingly, in our survey, we said that we want to keep that home feeling. So it's what we can't see right now, but is out there to give us that ability to go, no, Austin, we're going to do this. We're going to make this happen on ourselves for our local government, and to take it out of Austin's hands if for whatever we can. So, and Charlie's right. The job of this commission is not to decide whether or not we're going to pursue a home rule charter. Your job is to come up with one and then help us to get it on the ballot as a council, and then help us to market it and to educate our citizens before they go to the polls to vote on this. So what that means, Jim, and for all of you, is that I need buy-in. So, and I want to have these discussions with you. So nope, there's nothing that's prevented us from doing what we have thought is best for the citizens of Garden Ridge in the last 18 months in my tenure. But it's what I don't see. And it's what we talked about before that doesn't scare me, but I want us to take it to the next level, to take it out of Austin's hands, to give us the authority and the autonomy of local government to do what's best for the citizens of Garden Ridge, and we can all decide that. So I need your buy-in on that one. Did I answer your question? No. Okay. All right.
I have a thought. You
Go.
remember when we had a petition for a company wanted to come in and build a bunch of apartments, and the only way we got around that, because Garden Ridge is known for not a bunch of apartments, we don't want that. The community, the BAT community, is what kept that from being built. Now, I don't know if that makes a difference for home rule or general law city, but the reason it didn't get built is because there was protection of the bats. And so this is something that if someone brought initiative to the city council and said, hey, this company wants to build all these apartments here, do something for us. Is that an example?
Well, within the city of Garden Ridge, our ordinance 13, our planning and zoning ordinance limits
okay.
what type of density housing we can have. So,
But did we really have the no on that, or was it the environmentalists who protected the bat, who really had the final say in that.
So I don't know the answer to that question. That was before my tenure.
I was talking.
Okay.
Oh. That just
But
came to mind
that
about.
wasn't within, from my memory, that wasn't within the city limits of Garden Ridge. That was something else entirely.
It was a part away from, okay.
Yep.
But that was an example where, if that were to happen in our city limits, that might be an example for Jim to see.
Or in our ETJ,
Yeah.
which doesn't exist at the moment, as
Yeah.
far as where I pointed it out.
So whether or not, I mean, it's the potential, our future could be impacted. That's what we have to be ready for.
Yes. So what more can I answer for you? Ask me another question to see if I can give you a better answer. Because this is important.
So my understanding is the city of Selma is the only city in our surrounding area that's not a home rule city. Do we know why
Correct.
they're not a home rule city? Why they decided not to go home rule?
So I've had a discussion with their mayor, and that's something that, well, it's currently the way, how do I answer this? General
Mayor,
law
I'm
type
trying-
A
I'm-
with
I'm-
them.
My brain's going to unintended consequences. I'm not arguing this is a great thing, and I now understand what we're doing, but I'm always a guy that thinks of what is the unintended consequence of doing something. So are there negative factors that can happen if we move forward in that?
Okay, you bet.
In my 21 years of practicing municipal laws, I have never seen an unintended consequences because someone is a home rule city. I have seen in my 21 years, many times where a general law city wanted to regulate something in a particular way but could not because they didn't have the authority to do it. Another example that pops into my mind is a home rule city has the authority to regulate signs however it wants. A general law city has to regulate signs through its zoning regulations because there is no specific statutory authority for a general law type A city to regulate signs. It has to be regulated as a structure through a zoning ordinance, which means whenever we, and we can only regulate it through the zoning authority. As a home rule city, you're going to have greater flexibility in regulating signs. Signs is always the citizens don't like signs, right? They think it makes the community look ugly. The business community loves signs because they believe that they can't operate a business without signs. So there's always that push and pull. But you have greater authority to regulate signs as a home rule city than you do as a general law, because as a general law city, you have to use your zoning regulations. You can take your signs out of your zoning code and regulate them separately. Regulate them separately as a general law city. But 21 years, that's actually a great way to think of it. What are the unintended consequences? And I haven't seen any negative consequence of going home rule. I have seen negative consequences based on what someone put in their charter, but not going as a general matter, becoming a home rule community. It's all about what you put in the charter that could create the unintended consequences.
So am I correct that, and again, I'm a new guy here, so
Yes,
I have
sir.
lots of questions. So if we start wanting to regulate and do initiative and referendums, and we get that into a home rule, everything has to go to a vote of the population of Garden Ridge, correct?
No. No.
It doesn't all have to be voted on?
No. So if you choose to put the power of initiative in your charter, it gives the citizens the right to petition, and there's there's just so many different ways to do it, and we can get into that discussion. But once we get to that point. But as a general matter, it gives the citizens, if you choose to put it in the charter, it doesn't have to go in there. So if you choose to put it in there and it gets voted on, the right to petition its government based on the rules that you lay out in the charter to request legislation to be adopted. And so as a general matter, what happens is a petition is circulated in the community that says, we want to adopt legislation X. You get the appropriate number of signatures. Those signatures are submitted to the city. They're verified as accurate and correct and the right number. That petition is then presented to the city council. The city council goes, we think that legislation X is a good thing to be adopted, so we will adopt it. And that's the end of it. Or the city council says, we think this is important enough legislation and it is controversial enough legislation within the community that we think the citizens should vote on this. So we choose not to adopt it. Rather, we choose to put it on the ballot to have the citizens vote as to whether or not. So it's only those things that are brought forward by petition that have to be voted on by the public. Everything else works exactly the same as it always would.
And as a general law city, we would not be able to do that.
You can't do that. You can't do that as a general law city.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you do, what you can do, what we do right now? If a citizen has something that they want the city council to consider, they take it to individual council people and mayors, and they try to work up interest for that legislation with the council, so that the council will then bring it forward. So this gives the citizens, it seems to me, that if they're not getting the proper response from council that they want on a particular issue, they can go ahead and move it forward of their own. So it gives the citizens more direct control over, and I think that's, when I look at home rule versus type A, and honestly, right now I'm drawing a complete blank, but there were tons of things that I can think of that we wanted to do on planning and zoning and as mayor that we were, not necessarily we couldn't do it, but we had to do it very differently and very much around the edge, like the sign issue. But the whole point of this to me is that it puts the control of our city truly in the hands of the citizenry. It takes the legislature out of the business of doing our business. And that to me is what's really important about this. But I'll put my head on and try to remember some of the stuff that happened, but there were tons of things we had to be very creative to get happen.
And your question was, what are the unintended consequences? That's actually a really direct on-point question. And again, to be clear though, the actual becoming of a home rule city, I cannot think of a single, nor have I seen a single unintended consequence simply because someone chose to throw the reins of general laws off. I have seen unintended consequences because of what was placed in the charter, individual issues. So those are the things that is really important. That's the question I think you need to think about when you're talking about recall, when you're talking about initiative, when you're talking about referendum, if you're talking about giving the mayor the right to vote but not changing the number of council members. There potentially could be unintended consequences with those types of decisions, but those are specific items that are placed in the charter, not just generally changing to home rule from general law.
How usual is it to make an addendum on a charter once it's been made?
Not very usual.
Okay.
If you do it right, you should never have to make a change again.
So let's
think
say,
about it. It's really a home rule charter is the United States Constitution for your city. That's
Right.
That's what it is. You are adopting your form of government for your community. That's what you're doing. And so if it's done right, you shouldn't have to make any amendments at all. However, having said that, as your community grows, perhaps you want to add a council member, perhaps you want to add terms,
Right.
perhaps something happens, you want to create term limits. So things do come up just
Right.
through the natural growth of a community that we think that we need to add to our charter, and so we place it in front of the citizens. One point, though, a charter cannot be amended except once every 2 years.
Oh,
So
okay.
once you adopt your charter, you have 2 years to make sure that it's in the right form, and then if it's not, then, you can place something on the ballot to amend it.
I have a question about timeline. Obviously, we have a date that we're trying to meet. And being on planning and zoning, I've been involved in rewriting some of the ordinance, and I know how that can go on and on and on. So I wanted to see, is there a plan of action? Is there a schedule? Is there an outline of how this is going to be addressed, broken down in the meetings?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, again, this is what I was recommending. When I was talking to the mayor and to Nancy about this and about the timeline and about the process, it's actually why I suggested the Fort Stockton Charter. And I don't want to be accused of placing something on y'all that you're forced to adopt, because you are not. But we saw the dates of the meetings. We have 7 meeting dates. If I don't like going more than 3 hours during a meeting, because I think brains get tired and we're not productive. So do the math on that, right? We have 21 hours of time to really get it. And I apologize, those meeting dates and times are set around my schedule, which is just very, very crowded and busy, even at this time of year. I have a meeting every night tonight, as an example. I have a meeting every night this week. And on Saturday, by the way, I have to go to a meeting on Saturday. My thought process would be that we would take, because the Fort Stockton Charter actually is laid out, just from not the substance of it, but how it's laid out, is laid out in a way that almost every charter is laid out. It's got, the first article is the form of government and the boundaries. The second article is the powers of the city. The third article is how the city council is laid out. The fourth article talks about the department services that are provided, which includes administrative, city attorney, municipal judges, things of that nature. Article 5 talks about elections. Article 6 talks about recall, initiative, and referendum. They have all of theirs in their charter. 7 has just some general provisions, which is going to be fairly boilerplate, to be honest, and 8 is also legal provisions, which is also pretty boilerplate. My thought is that we would go, those are general subject matters that how every charter is laid out, all right? Some have less, some have more, but we would use that as our guide. You may say, we want different language, we want different substance, we want things that are different, but we can use this as the roadmap to move forward. So the first meeting, we may get through form of government and powers of the city and through half of city council, right? But that's why I say take this home, read it, because it's going to give you some good ideas on substance, but it's also going to give the roadmap on how these next 7 meetings or 6 meetings are laid out. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
My question might be more for Nadine. So with the meeting schedule, if we are not able to come to a meeting, is there a way we can submit comments?
What is the normal practice for commissions in this situation?
It's your committee, Chairman.
I guess I want to know what the current commissions are doing relative to written comments.
We only allow citizens to submit written comments if it is for a posted public hearing.
I think she's talking about, as a commissioner, if she can't make a particular
Right.
meeting.
For our other commissions, we don't allow our other commissioners to join remotely, virtually. Basically, if they're unable to attend, as long as we still have a quorum, we would have a meeting, basically without them.
What we had done in the past, and again, I'm really cold on this because I've kind of been out of this for 4 years or more, is if you've got a particular area of interest and you're not going to be available, if you could jot down your thoughts and ideas, and as chair, I can bring it forward to the group as best I understand it, based upon what you've provided. That way, we make sure that you don't miss out your opportunity to have that discussion. If that is okay with the way we currently run our commissions. Nancy?
I would recommend that if you do have comments that you want to pass forward to the chair, either send them to me or Marissa so that we can make sure that we avoid any kind of TOMA violation.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, y'all are subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act because you are more than a recommending body. Your decision goes to city council, and city council has no discretion with respect to placing it on the ballot. They have to place it on the ballot exactly as you present it to them. So they don't get to make changes. And so that means, so that means based on the law, y'all have to comply with the Texas Open Meetings Act, which means we have to have a quorum. I don't. Two of you talking to each other about this. I prefer that none of you talk to each other about this outside of meeting. I think you did it to me on purpose.
So Charlie, we're going to have discussion and debate, and along the way, are there points where we do votes on something?
Yes, I was going to get to that next. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's what I would request. So this is the way I've always worked the process. We'll have a discussion about an article and a section, and we'll have a vote on each section. All right? And then I will do the Scribner work on the back end to put it in the form that y'all have requested and voted that it be in. And I will bring that back at the next meeting, not for redebate, not for rediscussion, not for reconsideration, but simply to ensure that I have drafted it in the way that y'all voted it for it to be drafted on. And then we would make sure that that was okay, and then we would, at the next meeting, and then we would then move on to go into each section and having a vote on each section. And then, and then once it's complete, then we'll have a final vote on the whole thing.
And this will be based on the Fort Stockton points,
I
sort of?
I just feel using this as a good roadmap. But I do urge you to, in your spare time, take a look, I mean,
Looking at it
the
now.
more, the more you know, what is it? The more you know, right? Yeah. Is a good thing. And please bring things to the table.
Fair enough.
I'm not typically, when I'm performing or I usually don't perform as city attorney other than supervising things, but when I do perform as city attorney, I don't get into policy. I don't make policy recommendations. In this instance, I will be giving you my personal opinion in my experience on the pros and cons. Y'all take that for what it's worth. Do your own research on the pros and cons. But I will do more than I normally do with respect to policy issues. Because I'm really not acting as your legal advisor. I am somewhat, because there are things that you just can't put in a charter because it's a violation of the law. Not a violation of the law. It's unenforceable because it's not allowed in the law or something of that nature. So I'm keeping you in the making sure our charter is consistent with the law. But really, I'm here because I know an awful lot about how charters are drafted. I know an awful lot about how city form of government runs. I've seen a bunch of things in my 21 years, and I always know when we're on the track, and I can always tell you what's going to be potentially at the end of that track, because I've seen a lot. I represent, as city attorney, I represent 45 cities across the state of Texas. I'm hired as special counsel well over 30, and then I get hired on individual issues so I've seen a lot in this area of the law, both from policy and legal. But go ahead.
One last question. How does the Home Rule Charter, or how does it affect the other commissions and their powers that are currently in the city, and does it affect it at all?
It shouldn't affect them at all.
Okay.
Some commissions and committees in your city are statutory in nature. Planning Commission, Zoning Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, Zoning Board of Adjustment. Clearly statutory, can't do anything. It is what it is. I have had some communities that there is a particular commission that is so important to the community that they want it placed in the charter so that the council can't mess with it, right? That's far and few between. 2 or 3 times in 20 years I've seen that. But otherwise, your charter, all your other committees and commissions should continue to operate. The Home Rule Charter, adoption of the Home Rule Charter should not affect them at all. It's still City council has the power to appoint and remove and create and do all of those things. It should
So
have no impact on them.
I guess one specific example would be the Planning and Zoning Commission is just an approval body or recommending body. So if the city council wanted to change that to being an actual body that approves planning and zoning things versus sending it to council, is that something that would be done by ordinance?
Can't do that under the
Can't-
law.
I'm sorry?
You can't do that under the law. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body when it comes to zoning decisions, and that's statute. State law dictates that. That's
Okay.
one of the things where the state law has said, doesn't matter, home rule, general law, this is how we make zoning decisions. Goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission, goes to the Zoning Commission. Then a recommendation is made to City Council. How do you approve your plats currently?
Planning and zoning recommendation to city council.
Okay, and so, yeah, right, and that can be done one of two ways. One is a recommendation of the approval of plats to city council, or city council can choose just to have the Planning and Zoning Commission approve plats. But I don't recommend that go in your charter. I think that should be a local, legislative decision, because there's an awful lot of analysis and thought and analytics that go into that decision-making as to whether or not P and Z should be the final approval authority, and it shouldn't be a constitutional issue. As a matter of fact, I don't know, do they even address a Planning and Zoning Commission in here? I don't think that they do. Yeah, and it's because it's all statutory. Yeah, it's all statutory. There's no need to create, like, you'll look at some charters and there shall be a Planning and Zoning Commission. It's in the charter. Completely unnecessary. If you're a home rule city, state law says there will be a Planning and Zoning Commission. It's not necessary to be in the charter. It's duplicative of state law. And if you look at some of these, you'll see some of that. If you go look at other charters, I mean, there's charters, they're 24, 25, 30 pages long, and they're just full of, there shall be this, or there shall be that. A lot of that stuff is just duplicative of state law, not necessary to be in there, confuses things, and just kills trees, like I've just done today, apparently. Good question about the roadmap, though, but that would be my recommendation. We follow the Fort Stockton example, not necessarily for its content, but for the roadmap that it takes us down to get to the content that y'all would like to see in your charter.
Are there any administrative costs or financial costs when we assume home rule?
Let me think about that. Not going home, in other words, becoming a home rule city, doing that doesn't create any additional cost that you don't already have. I could think of circumstances where not you necessarily, but a charter. Well, let me give you an example. The city of El Paso has just had an initiative submitted. El Paso has just had an initiative submitted to have an amendment to their charter, because the state law allows the citizens to initiate changes to the charter to be voted on. And it's going to be put before the voters for their consideration to create a climate policy. And that climate policy, if adopted by the citizens to be placed in the charter, will have a substantial cost to the city of El Paso. So there are things you could put in your charter that could create more cost, but the adoption of it in general doesn't do that. Becoming home rule doesn't say, okay, now you have to pay more money to the state or anything like that. Anything else? These are all great questions. It's the most, in my opinion, it's the most important decision for your community to make, the adoption of a home rule city. And in my mind, it's not the adoption necessarily, but it's the policies that are placed in the document itself that is the important part. Right? Are we a council manager form of government, or are we Houston, which is a council mayor form of government, where the mayor runs the day-to-day operations? Do we want an elected person making those decisions or a professional who's under the control of the city council making those decisions? Should we have 2-year terms, 3-year terms, 4-year terms? Should we have recall? Do we want to have recall if we only have 2-year terms? Do we have a recall if we have 3-year terms? Do we have initiative? Do we have a referendum? Yes? No? If yes, what is the process that we're going to have in place in order for an initiative to be brought forward? What are the signature requirements for a petition in order for a petition to be presented and considered by city council? Do we want to pay our council members? Things like that are in your charter. It's just an incredibly important document. It really is one of the reasons why I decided to use that as my applied research project. I just find it, I'm a weird previous college flunk out nerd who likes this stuff. And I just think this commission right here, this commission is the most important commission and committee ever in local government. What you decide to put in here is what your friends and neighbors are going to vote on to determine whether or not they want this as how they want their government to run and operate. And that's why I say you don't, to your point exactly, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Let's give ourselves the flexibility of being out from underneath the thumb so that in case something arises that is an issue for our community, we have the flexibility to address it, but let's not change how things are operating. In my mind, that's the best approach, but I don't get to make that decision. Y'all do. And then ultimately, your friends and neighbors who vote on it do. I've been doing this for a long time. I've only had a charter fail once in my entire career. And that's because the mayor, who was very popular at the time, didn't want the charter to pass because they were placing term limits that were retroactive that would have term limited out the mayor. And so the mayor's like, nope, I'm not on board with that. And she was a very popular mayor and she killed the charter. So they came back 2 years later, did another one, didn't have the retroactive term limits, and it passed.
So Charlie, just so I can get my brain straight.
Yes,
And
sir.
Mayor, you said, our role is not to decide whether we want to go home rule or general rule. Our role is to write a charter that the voters in May will look at, and they will decide whether we're going to stay general rule or home rule based on what's presented to them.
Yes, sir, you just nailed it. How do we feel about it? Yeah. I think I'll go home, have a whiskey, think about it. Vodka? No? Beer? I don't know. Lemonade? Whatever. Anything else? And that's right at 2 hours. I feel like y'all should go home and read this thing. I would read the Fort Stockton Charter. Again, it's a good roadmap with respect to how, if you go look at any charter, they're laid out almost exactly like this with respect to form of government, administration, council, all that. It's just laid out very similar. And then I would also look at the Texas Home Rule Charter. It's got this black front part by Blodgett. I assisted TML and some of my folks over in my law firm assisted TML updating this document, and there's some good information in here. I would just read the, when you're having trouble getting to sleep at night, just take a look at the table of contents. I think it would be history to, it's not long. I think it would be, beneficial to read, the concept and history of local self-government, the advantage of home rule status. I don't know that I would read the state preemption of local home rule. I don't know that I would read the adoption amendment, but I would then jump to form of government, powers of the city, the mayor. As we start going through those sections within the Fort Stockton to create our own charter, just kind of keep up with this because they're going to kind of flow together, and then read it, the day, a couple days before, whatever. I think it would be very beneficial. And I don't say that because I helped write it. Maybe a little. Anything else?
Are we ready to move on to announce the date and time of the next meeting, which will be Wednesday?
I am.
This Wednesday, November 30th, 6 o'clock. Item number 5, citizen comments. Are there any citizens here for further comment? No? Okay, with that, we are on item number 6. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.